Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Soul Rising podcast. I'm so glad that you are with us today. Joining us, we have the beautiful, wonderful Jessica Fein, amazing author. She just wrote a memoir that we're going to be talking a lot about today. It's called Breathtaking. If you could see it behind her screen, that beautiful cover. I love that cover. Is that a dahlia?
Yes, it is.
I
Yeah.
love dahlias. A memoir of family dreams and broken genes. And she is also the host of I Don't Know How You Do It, a podcast which features real, raw, and rare conversations, kind of like here, with people whose lives seem unimaginable from the outside. Her writing explores grief, resilience, and the unbreakable bonds of family. She's appeared in the New York Times, Psychology Today, Newsweek, the Boston Globe, HuffPost, as well as recently taking the TEDx stage. That's amazing, talking about grief literacy and how that's an antidote to loneliness. Jessica is a relentless warrior in the memory of her dynamic daughter, whom she lost to a rare disease in 2022. And her work encompasses hope, humor, grit, and grace, the tools that make up her personal survival kit. We could say that again: hope, humor, grit, and grace. Yeah. Isn't that what we all need? So, Jessica, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what, how you came to do the work that you're doing and why you're so passionate?
Absolutely. Yes. And so, first of all, thank you for having me. I know you and I have been talking about this for some time. So, I'm so glad that the day is finally here and
Mhm.
we get to have this conversation. So, thank you. My work really emerged from life experiences. I had a job that I was doing for decades, and that was, the job that I was going to and getting paid for. And meanwhile, I was having real life experience after experience that ended up becoming the thing that I A, am expert in, and B, am so passionate about. So while doing marketing and branding for, big company, I was living through immense amounts of loss, having lost three parents, two sisters, and then, as you said at the outset, my teenage daughter. And as a writer, I was writing all along and publishing essays. And after some time, when my daughter was still alive, I actually decided that I wanted to write about what had happened in a memoir form. So that's how the book came to be. And it actually was written and completed while my daughter was still alive. So I think that's an important thing to say, because this is not in any way a book about my daughter's death. It's very much about her life. Now, having said that, there is an epilogue because she did die once it was already in kind of the works and had been sold to a publisher. So that is included, but it is not the main focus of the book, since it doesn't happen until after the narrative.
So, what is the main focus of the book? If you could
Yeah.
sum it
So
up. And this is the hardest thing, right? When people say, "What's your book about?" in 30
I
seconds.
know, I'm like,
Never.
really?
Well,
How long do you have? And then
first,
they're like, you need to have the one sentence,
the
go.
elevator pitch. I'm still working on it a year and a half
Right,
later.
exactly. I'm like,
It
okay, do
changes
you
every
want
time.
like the real deal, or do you want that
No,
little
no, no, no.
marketing
Tell me.
logline?
No, no, no. I want to know. I want to know about it. Tell
All
me
right.
more about you.
So the book is really about my husband and I, how we made our family, and how we loved and lost parts of our family. So we met in college and dated for a decade before we got married. And once we did get married, we were like, okay, let's, make a family. And that actually turned out to look very different from what we had imagined it would look like. We did 5 years of fertility treatments. We did every procedure and intervention that people have heard of, and many that they haven't. And 25 procedures later, 5 years later, we really changed our focus and fell in love with the idea of international adoption. So we adopted three children from Guatemala and thought that now the hard part was over. When our middle child was 5, she was diagnosed with an ultra rare degenerative disease called MRF syndrome, which stands for myoclonic epilepsy, ragged red fibers. It's a kind of mitochondrial disease. And it's a horrible, insidious, degenerative illness that was something that she and we contended with until she was 17. So the book really takes us through, first of all, the whole bit about building our family, making our family, and then about coming to terms with this diagnosis and moving from being somebody who thought that I actually was going to cure this incurable disease to learning how to have hope that looks different from finding a cure, how to create a life of joy and meaning in the midst of chaos and uncertainty, which is really all of our lives, right? All of us have lives that are filled with uncertainty and we don't have control. We like to pretend that we do, but we don't. And ultimately how we gave Dahlia and her siblings a childhood in this very, very unusual circumstance of living on the precipice for more than a decade.
And that's why you have the dahlia on the cover. I
And
didn't
that is
realize.
why there's a dahlia on the
I'm
cover.
sorry, I didn't realize that at first because
Oh, wow. You picked up that it was a dahlia without even knowing.
I know, and I've read before
Yeah.
that her name was Dahlia, and I just didn't like put the two together. But that's a beautiful story and very different because usually people are writing memoirs after the fact, right? The fact.
Yeah. I know so many people who have written stories when they've lost their child. The other thing that is different from many, many of the parents I know who have lost their child to a genetic disease or a rare disease, or both, is that most of them, and I am hesitating because I think it may be all of them, had that diagnosis very early on. And for most of them, their child didn't develop in the first place as they had expected.
Okay.
And in our situation, Dahlia was walking and talking and running and jumping and doing all the things and then slowly lost that functionality.
All right. So you talked about switching the lens of hope, basically,
Yeah.
instead of
Yeah.
we're gonna beat this, I'm gonna find the cure, all this. So what did that new hope look like?
Yeah. And, I just submitted an article on the topic
Wow.
of hope. So it's very front of mind for me
Great.
right now. And I think, without getting into politics, I think a lot of
Hmm.
people right now have things swirling around for them. And
Yeah.
so I'm drawing on some of the experiences that we had in terms of when things are swirling and when you don't know what the future's going to be. So,
Perfect.
I think the thing about hope, first of all, I'm a big fan of hope. I think it's terrific. And I think it is, in many respects, the opposite of despair.
Hmm.
The issue is when you are hoping for things that are uh, tinging on wishful thinking, it doesn't really help you. And what I mean by that is, first, I hoped that I would personally find a cure. Now, that is really fantasy. I'm not a doctor and I don't have millions of dollars. And there are many, many, many brilliant people who are trying to find a cure for mitochondrial disease. That wasn't going to be me. So that hope was dashed. But then, of course, we were hoping that the science would outpace the progression of the disease.
Hmm.
And that's a fine thing to hope for, but that's very passive. We didn't have anything to do with that hope. Either that was going to happen or it wasn't. So, what could we hope for that was possible? And I believe that when you have hopes that come to pass, it gives you the confidence to continue hoping.
Hmm.
For us, you asked, what did that look like? That might look like a day where there's no medical crisis. That might look like a date with my husband where we don't get interrupted by a phone call, you need to come back. That might look like an outing to Target that is successful on all fronts and doesn't, there's no medical or other kinds of hiccups along the way, right? So we adjust what we're hoping for, and I call them microdoses of hope because I think that way we can have a hope and then see that come to pass.
I love that microdoses of hope. Like small wins. It sounds like you're describing
Small,
small wins, little victories,
right.
nothing monumental, just these
And
little
that
things
doesn't
to keep
mean that we
going.
don't, yes, it doesn't mean that we're not still praying for a cure
Sure.
and hoping for a cure and
Yeah.
trying, but it means that, okay, what can we do? what do we have control over,
Yes.
right? And what can we hope for that is going to let us put our head on the pillow at night and be like, okay, you know what? We did it.
Yeah.
And by the way, there's a victory in that, right? And
Sure.
I talk as well about creating joy because I think again, there's a victory in standing up to this horrible situation and saying, you know what, I see you situation, but I'm not going to get knocked down. I'm going to stand up to you. And in the spite of you, we're going to create joy. We're going to have hope,
Mhm.
So I think these things make us feel like we have some agency in a situation that's so wildly out of our ultimate control.
Yeah. So how could a listener who's dealing with some catastrophic or even just day to day, right? Election, like whatever, just feeling hopeless,
Yeah.
dark, and despair over whatever it is, doesn't need to be catastrophic, and everybody's pain is, you can't compare it. But what would you tell listeners? Like, what did you do to find that joy to kind of create the self creation, like you said, of the
Yeah.
joy? Is
I
there
love
anything?
talking about this because, like I said, I'm a fan of hope and I'm a fan of
Yeah.
joy
Yeah.
too. And it's not about being like, having your head in the sand by any means.
Yeah.
Like we were in a horrible, horrible horror movie of a situation,
Uh-huh.
bottom line.
Uh-huh.
And we had 3 kids who wanted to have a childhood, who wanted to giggle and be silly and be
Yeah.
kids, and didn't want every day for an entire, for more than a decade to be dominated by the thing that was very clearly there. And I will say that we learned this from Dahlia because Dahlia, more than anybody, had the right to be angry and scared and stressed and to say, you know what, I'm not even getting out of bed. And she was not having that. She was like, okay, yes. And like, I want to take this syringe that's supposed to hold the medicine and fill it with water and squirt you in the face. And I want to, you know, dance, even though all I can move right now is my shoulders. And I want to go out and have fun and do things.
Mm-hmm.
And if she wanted to do that, well, then we were going to do that. And so that really set the tone for the way we lived for all of those years. And we all really decided to create these moments of joy. And when you have a situation that is so difficult and so out of the ordinary, doing things that are quite ordinary
Mm-hmm.
become extraordinary. I mentioned going to Target. Well, we
Yeah.
could make the biggest party in the aisles of Target. You
Yeah.
wouldn't even be able to imagine.
Yeah.
So, we would do things that other people probably wouldn't even give a second thought to. And for us, it would be a celebration.
So it was intentional. What I'm hearing,
Very
intentionality.
intentional, very aware. And that was another big transformation for me because I am definitely the forward thinking planner, fixer, all that kind of stuff. And this was, I mean, if ever there's an exercise in being right in the moment, what's in front of you right now, that's really how we had to learn to live.
And that's a gift. Sometimes these situations, force us. They force us. We don't have any
They
other
force
choice.
you have to be so present when, and I alluded to it earlier. For us, it was parenting on the precipice or living on the precipice, where literally every single minute we were in a life or death situation. So this wasn't, you couldn't be distracted and like off in la la land. Like you had to be watching what was going on. And in fact, Dahlia was an eyes on patient, meaning my husband, myself, or a nurse trained specifically in her care needed to have our eyes on her 24/7,
Okay.
around the clock.
Wow.
If I'm home alone with her, I am not going to the bathroom alone.
Yeah.
So that's another way that you are, you're really present.
Now, would you say that being present requires a larger amount of vulnerability versus being able to just like be there, but not really be there because it's too hard. Too hard to actually be here. What do you think
I
about
would
that?
say that vulnerability became something I learned about over the course of this time, but it was not related to the being present. I
Okay.
think be present and be also like have like a suit of armor on, which I kind of did a lot of the time to kind of stay strong. I learned about vulnerability a different way and introduced that well along in the journey. And that was something that I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about because it was a real eye opener for me. And I wish somebody had pointed it out to me earlier. I had heard about it earlier because I think it would have had an impact on me and I would have done things a little bit differently. So now it's like every opportunity I
Yeah.
get, I'm like,
Yeah.
vulnerability.
Please. Yeah.
But
Share with us.
what happened with us was that my husband and I really put on a very much of a strong front for all of our kids because what we were dealing with was so very heavy. We didn't want them to have to carry anything more than they already were. And so we tried to carry that for them. And we had experts along the way, doctors and so forth, saying, you got to bring them along. You got to unpack this for them. And we were like, we got it. And that's also a lesson to listen to experts. But in any event, somewhere along the way, many years in, one evening, our eldest came into our room, hysterical, hysterically crying. And we were so worried. Something's wrong with me, our eldest said. And we said, oh my God, what happened? What happened? I'm so upset and I'm so angry. And I pray and I pray and I pray, and Dahlia's not getting better. But you two are fine. What's wrong with me?
Wow.
And it was the most instant lesson I've ever had. I think a lot of lessons take time for them to sink in. This
Yeah.
was like
Yeah.
immediate. Oh my God, we have messed up royally because we were having our eldest and probably our youngest too, though he couldn't articulate it at the time, think that all these very natural and important feelings were wrong, that there was something,
Mm.
awry for
Mhm.
feeling
Mhm.
all these things.
Yeah.
And I learned, and even to this day, about how important it is to be vulnerable with people in general if you want support, but with our family and with our children
Okay.
so that they know, stress and anger and anxiety, whatever your situation is normal.
Yeah.
And we have these feelings and we integrate them and we move on with them. And, so it's really changed the way that I parent quite dramatically. And, I wish it didn't take me so long to figure it out. But once I did, it really did have a big impact.
I like that you're bringing this up. I remember when my brother died, he died 6.5 years ago, and I was a basket case for a very long time after that. And I was crying, and my older daughter came over to me and she was telling me to stop crying. It's okay, mommy. Stop crying. It's okay. And I said, no, honey, mommy needs to cry. I actually had this conversation again with her maybe less than a year ago. It came up again. Um, because she's kind of my younger one, like the real feeler. Like my younger
Yeah.
one will come over with like the tissue and hug me, and my older one's kind of like, yeah, I don't, not so
Yeah.
don't love those icky feelings, right? But
Yeah.
I was like, no, sweetie, like it's okay to cry. I have to cry, and it's fine. Mommies cry too. Doesn't mean that I'm not going to be okay 10 or 15 minutes from now, but I need to go through those feelings. So that was a lesson. I'm glad you're bringing this up because it's very important for parents to know.
Yes.
We have to model it, right? Our children are not going to be what we tell them to be or what we say we are. They're going to be what we are.
Right.
They're watching. They are watching. So words are meaningless, right? Actions speak louder than words, all these tried and true phrases. They're watching everything and they're gonna emulate us.
Mhm.
So, thank you for bringing that up. That's very,
Yeah.
very important. Vulnerability is huge, and I love how you said, and I touched on this in the last episode I just put out, about you have to be vulnerable in order to get support.
Oh, yeah, that's another thing. We sit around and we're like, why isn't anybody giving me support? Well, because guess what? Nobody knows you need it if you don't ask or if you don't show it, right? They
Yeah.
think, oh, you're fine. And, that is an interesting one because we all wish that, everybody in our life was a mind reader and they knew when we needed some extra loving care, but it doesn't always work that way. And somebody that I was talking to said, you increase your chances of getting help exponentially when you ask for it. And I thought that was so smart, right? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's so common sense, but
of
yeah, it's not
course.
always
And we sit
like,
there and we're like, oh,
"No,
okay,
just
I'm
wing
fine.
it."
No, don't worry about it. So, so that's right. I mean, people can show up in surprising ways when they know A, what's going on, and B, that you could use some support.
And then there's those people who can't, What was your journey like with that, with friends and
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that is the other thing at the beginning. You asked about my work now. And one of the things that I do write about quite a bit and speak about is how we can show up in meaningful ways. And, in my case, it's specifically about grief, but all of it can be extrapolated for any kind of, pain and suffering.
Mhm.
But the fact is, we are awkward and uncomfortable when it comes to grief in particular, but any kind of loss, which for sure an illness over time can be a series of, little losses that
Yes.
really add up.
Yes.
And, what's ironic is it is the single most universal thing. Everybody is going to be a griever. If you haven't been yet, you will be, right?
And you already are if you pay attention. If you pay
If you pay
close
attention,
enough
right?
attention to, like, I talk all the time about how grief manifests in all these different ways, even good change, right? We always look at it
Yes,
as something bad changing in our life that's giving us
right.
grief and loss. Something good. If you look hard enough, we are grieving something all the time.
All the time. And the grief that we really need to have support for when we're talking about grief from any kind of loss. And again, it doesn't have to mean somebody died. It might
Yeah.
mean that you got divorced or you lost a job or you whatever.
Yeah.
That's where people get weird and uncomfortable. They just do. They
Uh-huh.
don't know what to say. They're terrified they're going to say the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So they don't say anything at all. Or they fall back on very trite things that often have the opposite effect of what's intended.
Yeah.
So they say something like, "Oh, I can't imagine."
Mm.
Well, is there anything in the world that makes us feel more alone than being told we're in a situation that's so unusual that somebody else can't even imagine it?
Sometimes
Right?
I wonder if they're saying that, like, almost like they're not finishing the thought on that. It might be like, I can't imagine, like, how are you getting through that? You're so strong, you
Oh,
know?
you're so strong. We could talk about that one
Yeah,
too. Right.
exactly. You're so
Yeah.
strong,
You're so
So I
strong.
think there's a good intention, of course. They're all good intentions.
All of it is good, well intentioned. I mean, I choose to believe that all of it is well intentioned. I
Yeah.
don't think anybody's like, you're so strong. You
No,
know, that people say it because they want to be supportive. They don't know what to say. Um,
I feel
and
like we think that they're giving you a compliment almost, like, that's
yeah,
strength, right? Like, you're so strong, but they're not understanding. People that aren't versed in this, and I like that you talked in your TEDx about grief literacy. Maybe we could talk a little bit more about that too.
yes,
Like, what should people say, right? But
right.
let's stick to like the friends and the, not being, and then we'll get into that. I'll make a note. We'll get
Yeah,
into that.
yeah. Because I think it's important to not
Yeah.
only say this is what you shouldn't do, but maybe this is what you can do.
Yes.
And I do think that people are well intentioned. I think that there is some implied respect when people say you're so strong.
Yeah.
I think when people say, I can't imagine, they're limiting themselves because I believe they can imagine.
They just don't want to.
Want
It's
to.
too scary.
Who wants to imagine it? But of course you can, unless you have a really limited imagination. But okay.
Yeah. Or like
Or
zero capacity for empathy or vulnerability,
exactly,
or your
exactly.
emotional intelligence is just zero.
But all we want, whatever we're going through, is to feel validated and to feel seen. I mean, that's what we're looking for. And to
Yeah.
say something like, I can't imagine, it just puts up a wall. There's no way to respond to that.
Now, were there people who you were sure you were gonna be validated by and seen and weren't?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there were people who just kind of didn't show up. You'd get like a little bit of a, formal whatever.
Yeah.
But what was way more interesting was the people you didn't expect to show up who
Yes.
did.
Yes. We were talking right before this for the
Yes.
listeners. My best friend today here out in Colorado, we were acquaintances when my
Mhm.
brother died. Her mother died, I believe, a year or so before. So she understood what I was feeling. Like, she
Yes.
saw it. She saw it. She recognized it, and she was able to show up for me. And that's, really, I think only another griever. It's like any type of support, right? Like, I'm sober. I go to recovery groups. Those other alcoholics can understand me better than somebody
Yes.
else who's not an alcoholic. It's the same thing with grief. But in that respect, we need to learn how to be and help each other through, even if we don't understand, we should try.
Right.
I
We
think.
should try. Or we should just show up and say, I don't know what to say.
or I'm uncomfortable
But
with this. But that would also require vulnerability. And I just think
right.
most people maybe
Yes,
aren't capable of it.
exactly. Because if somebody were to say, "Look, I don't know what to say. I don't want, I'm afraid I'm going to say the wrong thing, but I'm here and I'm not going away."
That's what we
Okay,
really want, really. When we're in that
right.
space, that dark space, we just want somebody that to just be there. You don't have to say
To
anything.
acknowledge it and
Yeah.
to not expect that 3 months later we're healed. You know, I often say I intend to be grieving every single day for the rest of my life.
Mhm.
How could it be otherwise?
Mhm.
Right? I
Mhm.
mean, how could I not be grieving the people I lost who are such an important part of who I am?
Yeah.
And so I intend to be grieving. And the idea of like, well, by X amount of time, you should be done with that and have moved on. I don't want to move on.
Sure.
I want to move with.
I don't think people understand that when we say we will be grieving forever, it doesn't mean I'm laying in a ball on the floor or tucked under my covers. We're
No.
living, we're purposeful today. We're choosing to use our grief as a gift. I look at it as a gift on most days, that it's something that has motivated me to now try to help others and for me to keep growing spiritually, emotionally, in all those ways. So when we say that we will be forever grieving, it's that end both. Right. I've been really
And
big on this
both.
end both
Totally.
thing, right? Like, yes, I will always miss my brother, my cousin, my aunts, my grandpa, all these people, a boyfriend, all these people who have passed away that are very important. My dog, right? Like I will always be holding those people with me, but doesn't mean that I'm not living and enjoying joy, right? Is in enjoy life. I'm able to feel a spectrum of
Well, and I think that's such an important thing, right? Is that people can understand that you can be grieving and have joy at the same time.
Mhm.
Because if we, start with the premise that we're going to be grieving for the rest of our lives, we have to also accept that grief and joy can live together. Because I don't
Exactly.
intend to be, you know, desolate for the rest of my
Sure.
life.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's another thing that is a misconception is that people don't expect if they haven't been through it that you can be in the deepest, darkest depths of sadness and you can laugh. You can be happy, you
Yes.
know.
Definitely. Definitely. So tell us more about the grief literacy. Let's get into that. So
Okay.
what should people say?
Okay. So the first thing that I say is what you do is more important than what you say. And so in mindfulness, there's a saying, don't just do something, sit there. And that is so important because the most meaningful thing you can do is be present over time. So that's the first thing. You can be there. You can say the person's name, the person who has died. Say their name. Share stories if you have them. And if you don't, ask. I'd love to know, what did she love to do? Or, whatever the thing is. The person wants to talk about the person they've
Yeah.
lost.
Yeah. 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 It's not like if you don't talk about them or bring them up that we're going to forget
Well,
about
that's
them.
another thing. People are like, well, I don't want to bring it up. I don't want to make her
Yeah.
sad. Well, it's like, guess what? I'm aware that they died.
Yeah.
You're not reminding me.
You're not reminding me.
So,
Yes.
right
Yes.
now, if you have pictures, please, please, the biggest gift I can get is if somebody sends me a picture. It is the only way I have to make a new memory with my person.
Yes.
Videos are the best. I did not take a lot of videos. And so I'm so grateful when people send me a video or share their stories. I want to feel my person as frequently and as many different ways as possible. So being able to talk about her, that doesn't mean that all day long I want to sit around and talk about, my sisters or my daughter or whatever. But it means I don't want it all of a sudden for them to have become like forbidden topics that.
Yeah.
Another thing is, people tend, and I'm sure you know this, to be like, so let me know if there's anything I can do. Well, you know what? I have enough going on without trying to figure out what you can do.
Yeah. Just
So,
do it. Just do it.
right? Just do it. And depending on what your relationship is with that
Yeah.
person, you can decide what the appropriate thing is to
Yeah.
do. And there's a
Right.
thousand different ways that can
Yes.
look.
Get a little
But
creative. Put 5 seconds of thought into it and you could probably
exactly, and
find
just
something.
do the thing. don't expect for them to be like, "Oh, wait, 3 weeks ago, somebody said if there was anything I could do,
Yeah,
they could
yeah,
do,"
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Yeah, they
Especially when
can't.
you're in that grief state of you're just discombobulated and
Yes.
disoriented. It's almost like I call it like the netherworld. It's
Yeah.
almost like, right? Like you're not here, you're not there, obviously, but you're in this floating, like weird space where
It's
everything,
such a weird space. Yes,
yeah,
totally. And on that thing, by the way, here's something easy, and you don't even have to know somebody well, but when Dahlia died, it was a different time, obviously, than some of the earlier losses. And we received, I don't even know how many gift cards to like Grubhub, Uber Eats, that kind of
mhm,
thing.
mhm.
Okay. Somebody might be like, well, that doesn't feel very personal. That was so great because I still had two kids that needed to have dinner every night.
Yeah.
And we were set for a long time with those Grubhub gift cards. And that meant I didn't have to think about it.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
it's such a little thing, like whatever.
Oh, but it's
But
still all consuming as a parent, as a mother,
exactly. Oh
or
my
a
God,
daughter, the
another
food.
meal.
We're just constantly thinking about the food, right?
Yes. So that was really actually a really useful, easy
Good.
thing
Okay,
for
that's
making.
good to know.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. So if anybody out there is looking to help out a friend,
I like to say, I
children,
mean, if you're a good friend, then what you might do is put together a menu. Here are 10 things that I'm here and available for. You know, take your other kids out to ice cream, mow your lawn, do your laundry, whatever it is. Here are the 10 things. I'm giving them to you. The offer stands. Just check something off and let me know what but now you're
yeah,
not making creatively come up with what you might do.
yes, that's a great idea too. So it's right there. Put it on your fridge.
Yeah,
Say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so
exactly.
overwhelmed today. Susan said she would help me out. What can she do?" Right? Yeah.
Yes, and also, another thing is, please, please, please remember the other kids, and that doesn't it's not only for child loss, like, you can if somebody loses their
Yes.
sibling and that person has children, like, those children need attention, and it's a loss for them too, I think that siblings in particular, I believe, are the forgotten mourners,
Yes. Yeah.
um, and I mean, what's interesting is that I was the sibling twice, but when my first sister died and I was younger and she was my best friend, I was very much in the like everybody descended and was there for my parents. And now, as a parent with two children who have lost their sibling, I see it. I see how communities come for parents, which
Yeah.
is beautiful.
Yeah.
But the siblings often then are left on their own. So doing something for the kids in particular. I'll give you a really concrete example. I don't know. I like concrete examples for myself. I'm like, but what do I do?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
It was a distant relative. She had never even met Dahlia, but she sent my other two kids, each of them got a package with their name on it. And it was filled with different kinds of things like a cozy throw, a book, I think a stuffed animal, whatever it was. It was each had their own package. This should not be something that sticks in my mind as much as it does. The reason it does is because nobody else did
Nobody
that.
else did that.
I'm getting flowers and edible arrangements every single day, right?
Mhm.
And the kids got something with their name on it. It's saying to them, I see you, I recognize, I know what's going on here. It's so, you don't even have to know the kid to be able to put something like that together.
Exactly. When they say, "What can I do for you?" Take people up on their offers. They're
Oh,
not
yeah.
they're not saying it just to be nice. People want to help, right? You're allowing somebody to be of service when you're saying, "Hey,
Yes.
can you go pick up my daughter a soccer practice?" Like,
Right. It is a
you know,
gift. It is letting them be
yeah,
useful, letting them, as you say, be of service. Absolutely. And it's saying to them, I trust you.
yeah, and if they can't, they'll say, "I'm sorry, I can't," right?
Yeah. But
Like,
how about next week?
yeah, exactly. So, yes, let people be of service. Let them, yeah, showing them that you trust them. That's huge. And
Yeah.
yeah, so take people up on their offers. And if you're having a good day, for the listeners, if you're having a good day, jot down a few things you might need, right? If you can think of
Yes.
things, right? So that when somebody asks, you could say, "Yes, I need this."
Another thing is invite your friend to do things. It doesn't have to all be heavy.
Yes.
Invite them. And then when they say no, keep inviting them because sometimes they
Yes.
might say yes. I was on a panel once. We were talking about the grief, and it was, I don't know, three or four of us. And where we came to was this woman had these friends who kept inviting her to go kayaking. And she was like, I mean, this was the last thing in the world I was ever going to want to do is go kayaking, but I really wanted to be invited. Right. So I
Yeah.
had some making t-shirts that said, invite me to go kayaking because we
Yes.
want to still feel like we're part of the world. Doesn't
Yeah.
mean we're going to show up, but at some point we might.
Yeah, because we already feel so lonely and
So
lost and
lonely. Yeah. And that's the
alone.
whole point is that we're already feeling lonely. And then all these things that happen in our grief journey just make us feel lonelier.
Yeah.
That's why I feel like we could do so much better as a society.
We certainly can, and I love how you brought up the siblings. I'm actually gonna have, a guest on in March in a while, but, she wrote a book called Always a Sibling, like
Yes. Annie Orenstein.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
and,
And by the way, speaking of which, you had mentioned my sign behind. Do you see what's happening now? The dahlia
the
is like
light
lit
the
up by
light,
the way the sun is on it.
I love that.
Well,
I did notice that. I did notice that. I'm glad you pointed that out. Um
yeah, Annie Orenstein, that's a great book.
Always a sibling. And, I'm really eager to have that conversation with her because it's so true. I'm a sibling, right? I lost my brother and I was here in Colorado and my parents were in New York and Florida. So they had their people there and I had my people here. So I didn't feel it as much.
Y
But what I do feel it is around my brother's birthday or holidays, I'm typically checking in on my parents. I'm typically, how are you guys doing? But like, it's the parents who lost their child and the siblings are just, and
How old were you?
I mean, I was older. I was 38 when Jeremy died. So I didn't need all of that, but it
So
would have
what?
been
He's the
nice.
person that you thought that you were gonna probably have for your entire life.
Yes.
That's the thing about siblings.
Yes. Yeah. The
They're the
person.
only people who kinda go on our whole journey with us.
Yeah.
And in my case, I don't know about yours, but my sisters were both older, so it was like I had never lived a day without them.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, my brother, um, moved to Seattle from New York in 2006. And he had a drug addiction then. I mean, he had a drug addiction before then too. So I kind of feel like I lost him before
Mm,
that. But just
yeah.
knowing he would have good times, he'd have a year of sobriety here, a year of sobriety there, but you just always think there when you bury your parents.
Exactly.
So whenever everything happens with my mom as she gets older, decisions have to be made, et cetera, it's me,
Yeah.
so, and I don't even know how capable Jeremy would be at that point if with his addiction or whatever. I mean, there's always that hope that he would have gotten sober and it would have stuck. But um, yeah, it's big. So is there anything else? So what does breathtaking actually mean?
Thank you for asking. So there are 3 meanings. So first of all, it's breathtaking for people who are listening, 2 words. And my daughter's disease quite literally took her breath away. She needed a ventilator in order to breathe. So that's a very literal taking of it. A
Okay.
second is the idea of pausing and being present and taking breaths, which we talked about earlier.
Hmm.
And then the third is the idea of beauty. And first of all, my daughter was quite the beauty. But it was about for us creating moments, what I call corners of beauty in this, very swirly kind of dark reality. And it was, about being able to create that. And so breathtaking in terms of something being beautiful.
I love that. So again, back to that intentionality around the joy and
Yeah.
create breathtaking moments.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. I love it. So, is there anything you want to leave our listeners with, a tagline or anything that you could say to help
I don't have a
people?
tagline, but I'm thinking I better get one because lately I just had the question, "What's your motto?" And I was like, "Oh boy, I got to get a motto." I don't know. I'm open for suggestion. If anybody has a motto they want to share, I'd love to have. I think that what I really learned is we are capable of so much more than we think we are.
Mm,
I never in a million years would have thought that I could have gone through what I have gone through, and I surely didn't think that I'd be writing about it, talking on stages about it, and all that kind of stuff. And I think we are capable, and that's in the big stuff and the small stuff. We can do it. And when people say, "I don't know how you do it," or "I can't imagine,"
yeah,
and
yeah.
my podcast
Uh-huh.
is "I don't know how you do it," but the whole thing is tongue in cheek because the fact is we do it.
We have
You know,
to.
we have to.
We have to. But
Well,
but the amazing thing about what you're doing is you're not just surviving, you're thriving. You are thriving. make lemons lemonade out of lemons, that whole like trite
Mm.
thing. But like you're doing it. You are out there, you are helping other people. My friend, and I say this so often, it's actually the name of a book, but my friend says, don't waste the pain. Don't
Mm.
waste the pain. So what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do with it now? So I
Yeah.
really appreciate the fact that you are taking such a painful experience in your life and using it to make the world a kinder, gentler, better place and just helping people. That's what it's all about, right? Why else? Why else are we put through these harrowing experiences in
Yeah.
life if not to help others?
Right.
So thank you
Right.
for doing it. Well,
Yeah, and I love talking with people about it. I encourage anybody who's listening, definitely find me on my website,
yes.
jessicafeinstories.com. It's Fein as F like Frank, EIN. And that's where I have, all the different things that are happening, whether that's, the writing or the speaking or, just having a conversation. And obviously I'm on socials, etc. But
So
yeah,
I
love.
was just going to ask that question. Where can they find you? It's at Jessica
Yeah,
Klein on
Instagram and
social,
Facebook.
Instagram and Facebook. Okay. And then,
Or Substack. I have a Substack, which is called Fine by Me,
oh, I like
Fein.
that. That's clever.
Substack and
Okay.
and
Everybody, go check out Jessica. She is just a bright light in a sea of grief. And, the bright light and the
yeah,
grief, it exists all together. So thank you for
yeah,
being a shining example of what's possible through our
thank
pain.
you.
Thanks for
Thank
being
you
with
so
us
much.
today. Bye.